Hi there, this is John Drew here from Elevated Planet, and today I am with Mr. Chris Styles, our friend from Human Futurology. Is it humanfuturology.co.uk, Chris?
That's absolutely right, John. Well remembered.
Yeah, well, I just like to say, I mean, I've known Chris for several years now, and I have experienced his work firsthand in terms of mathematical blueprints that set out life paths that you would not truly believe. From a mainstream perspective, it's a real struggle to kind of get your head around the fact that your name and your date of birth can actually provide a blueprint which accurately reflects how your life path is likely to play out. Now, it's interesting because, of course, we have free will on this planet, so it does not mean that life is kind of just dictated to you at the outset. Far from it. But nevertheless, there are influences. So, Chris, just tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, John, it began many years ago with me frantically trying to understand events that had happened in my life and how they had happened, because I had certainly not planned for them to happen. So it's almost, if you will, these events that come from side field and completely knock you over. And one can process all of the emotions and all, but the question that I was always asking was why?
Mhm.
Why did things happen the way they did? And more importantly, when they did, especially if you were not planning it. And so began a very, very intense and a very extreme journey, during which I was looking to try to answer questions using logic. And given the fact that my father was a mathematician and a physicist, and the way he raised me was very much around logical thinking, numbers, patterns, and also universal laws. For example,
Right.
not just random arbitrary stuff, John, universal laws. And he always used to say to me, Chris, you have to be able to prove things. Like, for example, if you take two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen and you covalently bond them, every single time a coconut, you'll get a molecule of water. Therefore, that is a natural law. And he always used to say to me, the reason natural laws are so poorly understood is because most people don't study them. The other thing is that he always used to say to me is everything around us is an expression of mathematics. And John, that really got me thinking. It got me thinking very deeply, because if everything is an expression of mathematics, then surely so are you and so am I.
Hmm. Yes.
And really, John, what this then led to was this search. I had no idea what I was going to find or how I was going to find this. But it led to a very, very intense search that lasted many years for some kind of construct or framework that would allow me to begin to understand more about who I was on a numerical or mathematical level. And obviously, this just doesn't exist until I came across Pythagorean numerology. And this really opened up my mind. Now, my first brush with it was certainly not one that switched me on. In fact, I was rather underwhelmed
Right.
with how generic it was. But the one thing I kept on saying to myself was, hold on a moment. We know that with time, things get changed, things get bastardized, if you will. And I always thought that Pythagoras was a very, very, very smart guy.
Right.
So what if a lot of what Pythagoras had discovered, or a lot of what he had intentioned around using numbers to help us understand more about ourselves, had actually got lost?
Right.
And that all we are dealing with now, or what we're left with now, is a fraction of what he might have of carried in the way of knowledge, insight, profound wisdom. So, John, so began a journey whereby literally all I did was play with numbers, because there was no starting point. I had no seminal thesis that I could refer to. It was just a question of, here are bits and pieces of information. and some made sense and some didn't make sense. You know, how would I now begin to lock this together into some form of dynamic that actually has got intelligence to it and is not just a random thumbsuck?
Yeah.
Anyway, John, I was successful. I was successful in finding a way to be able to lock who you are in terms of your date of birth and your name together into, if you will, some kind of synchronistic framework. And then also by means of triangulation, which again goes right back to Pythagoras, because he was obviously rather fascinated with triangles. Just using the process of triangulation, where two knowns allow you to be able to calculate an unknown, I began to explode this very, very basic mathematical model, if you will, that I had created into something that now had multiple dimensions. And all of a sudden, John, the lights went on. Look, it's taken a very, very long time. I mean, the journey to search for this began back in 2010, 2011. The breakthrough came in 2017.
Right.
I mean, talk about, you know, seek and you will find.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's 7 or 8 years of searching, John.
Yeah.
Then since 2017, 2018, I have been working on and refining this predictive mathematical model to the point where it is now something that carries phenomenal accuracy, so much so that even when I've worked with very, very senior people within blue chip companies around the world, when I present their blueprints to them, they're completely blown away. And John, the thing that I'm really proud of now is it actually looks like, you know, a few little hoops to still jump through, but it looks like all my years of research have now led me to a point where a university here in the UK is in the process of onboarding me for a PhD.
Yeah, and congratulations, Chris. I mean, I know, as you say, it's not over the line yet, but at the end of the day, I've seen enough evidence from the work you do to realize how incredibly credible that it is. But that's the problem, right? Because this is not mainstream. This is something, mind you, you say that, but the likes of Tesla and many, many others, geniuses of the past, you know, they knew about these numerical sequences. They knew the importance of numbers. And so this is not new. This is something, but to do what you've done to create the blueprint in the way that you've done it, I think you could only do it because, to a degree, because you are you, right? I would say that because, and again, to caveat that with 2 points, your father, obviously, as the background and the foundation for who you have ultimately become. But then there is also your challenge, if you like, of the autistic scale, which is, I believe, a gift, because without that Asperger's kind of thing going on, high functioning, you know, you would not be able to apply the focus to something to create what you've created without having that. So this is kind of a perfect design to get somebody to get underneath the bonnet of this thing and really work out how numerical sequencing really does exist out there in the universe.
Well, John, it's incredibly kind of you to say that. And yes, I am autistic neurodivergent, diagnosed late in life. When I was finally diagnosed here in the UK at the age of 53, the lights went on. Suddenly I realized why I'd always experienced the world so differently and experienced so much frustration, and also frustrated so many other people, because I do not think like a neurotypical. And actually therein lies the creative opportunity. When you put someone who's neurodiverse with someone who is neurotypical, literally at the intersection, I believe, is a zone of phenomenal creativity. And it would be lovely, as you know, the years go on and the world begins to evolve, to see neurotypicals embracing autistic and neurodivergent people like myself in a much greater way in terms of business, in terms of strategy, etc. Because they'll see A, but I'll see Z. And somewhere in the middle lies the unknown lies the quantum leap that we are all searching for. But John, also, the really fascinating thing about all of this, and I've never really understood why, but numbers talk to me. So, like, when I'm sat down in front of a page of numbers or whatever, they just talk to me in a beautiful way, much the way words would in a book to someone who's reading the book.
Yeah.
And I can't explain it, John. I really can't explain it. I wish I could, but it is a gift. It is a talent. And I am just doing the very best that I can to make sure that this talent and gift that I have is being used in a way which ultimately is going to render real value into this world. And just on that note, John, if we think about the way the world has worked, initially it was all about IQ, how clever you were. Then along came EQ, and suddenly it was eureka. We've now discovered this new dimension called EQ, the emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. And suddenly, the world's leaders and the world's leadership books and the architecture of your big companies around the world was changed and dramatically in order to embrace this emotional dimension, because it's going to make you so much more complete. But isn't it amazing, John, how everything always happens in threes? And isn't it amazing that everything is three? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2,
Yes.
There's the creation. So now, if you think about, subconscious, conscious, superconscious, however you might want to express it. So IQ and EQ are only 2 dimensions. What about the third? And I truly believe, John, that with and through the discoveries that I have unlocked around intelligent mathematical blueprints, which reveals the architecture of your life in terms of themes and when experiences begin and when they end. I think that what I have done, John, is begin to open up, if you will, what I call the spiritual quotient or the metaphysical quotient.
Yes.
And is this not actually the next massive revolution, the massive revolution in terms of consciousness, the massive revolution in terms of leadership, the massive revolution in terms of how we are thinking about ourselves relative to others, the massive revolution in terms of how we are thinking about how we interact with everything around us, right down to, if you will, shareholder return. Because the spiritual quotient is something that, if you will, when you discuss it, it's completely nebulous. It's out there. But when you are suddenly able to start to package the spiritual quotient, I believe, of an individual into numbers and into patterns and into diagrams, oh my word. This is, I believe, exactly what happened with EQ. So I am saying this bravely and I'm saying this boldly. But John, I truly believe that my work, coupled with the work of many, many other brilliant people around the planet, is actually orchestrating, if you will, what I think in the next short term is going to be a spiritual revolution.
Yeah.
A complete revolution in terms of how we think, if you will, led by a new consciousness. And again, that leads into the work that you and Elevated Planet are doing, which is so critical because you are providing such an important platform for people to be able to engage with this material.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I'm excited on a few fronts here, and certainly I am very, very happy that the universities are really starting to take seriously, and I'm convinced that this will be part of the new era, and I think this new era is what we are stepping into over these next years ahead, and it's going to be turbulent, but at the end, I just think it's an exciting time as well.
John, I'm just going to share a quick and an interesting story. I am an exceptionally determined individual. Once I've made my mind up that I'm going to do something, I am not turned. I cannot tell you how many universities I've written to, explaining my work, explaining the passion that I have for numbers, explaining the difference I want to make in this world, and really, if you will, wearing my heart on my sleeve, writing to some of the most brilliant minds here in the UK, and acknowledged as such, to basically get, if you will, the equivalent of a Dear Johnny email back from the PA, saying, well, thank you so much, but we wish you all the very best with your endeavors. This material is not just being met with open arms, John.
No.
However, isn't it amazing that the academic who has identified me and who is prepared to take a risk on me in terms of a PhD, and who believes that there is something here that could be revolutionary, isn't it amazing that this academic is also neurodivergent?
Mm-hmm.
So I am so grateful that there is someone out there who is neurodivergent autistic within an academic institution who is equally, if not even more so, high performing than what I am, and who has said, I know you're different, and I know it sounds crazy, but I'm going to back you. And that's all I've ever asked for, John. But how interesting, and I just purely include this because even though the university is on the verge of kind of saying, right, it's game on, it was done through someone who understands neurodiversity, not through your traditional academic channel.
Yeah, I could understand that that being the case because, and I do think, we're all unique here in the world, but we're all unique for a specific reason. We have roles to play while we're here. And the fact is you were molded the way that you were because you are here to open up this world to people at a time which is going to be enormous change. And I can see how that could be the third section in terms of IQ, EQ, SQ. This is kind of like now the time to unfold this because it's a time when we're going to need it. We're going to need to understand a little bit more of the world around us. And I'm excited about where this is going to take you. And we will follow your path throughout anyway, because, for Elevated Planet, I always come to you to always, just get updates on where we are, what we need to be doing, because you've given us such great information in the past. And, we wouldn't do anything drastic without running it past Mr. Chris Styles.
You flatter me, John.
Well, no, it just happens to be true. Okay, so now let's get to this thing. We're in changing times, okay? We are starting to see, and my understanding was always it was going to be the second half of 2024 when we start to see the big changes start to come through. It doesn't end at the end of 2024, that's for sure. I think we've got years ahead of us of changes that are going on. But of course, one of the big focus points right now is America, is the political kind of front that we're seeing, and we've seen so many changes just over the last few weeks. So it's something that, we've been touching base on for a while, in the knowledge that as soon as Kamala Harris picked her running mate, this was the time to jump all over that from a numerical, from a blueprint perspective, to see how things figured out and to see how you would judge what is likely to unfold later this year.
Well, John, if I can take a leap back in time, 2017 and 2018 saw me plowing literally my entire life into unpacking numbers, unpacking codes, sequences, trying to understand how they hang together, and also frantically trying to find a construct in the way of a mathematical model that had laser accuracy on a predictive level. By early 2019, I had cracked this wide open. And I knew this because when I sat down with a couple of people who were very kind and willing, if you will, to be crash test dummies, and let me model their lives, when I created their bespoke data cubes and put them in front of them, they were absolutely astonished, and they were so blown away because everything was there, laser accurate, right down from moments of extreme success to moments of extreme trauma, to failures, to accidents, to births, to deaths. You know, it was all there. Then I realized, wow, this I've really created something that is out there. So I was then challenged by my business partner to analyze Rugby World Cup, because being South African, I obviously have a great love for rugby. And the challenge that was laid down was, if you are able to mathematically model people's lives, surely then you must be able to identify hotspots in terms of performance or opportunity. And if you were to take this whiz-bang thing that you've created and apply it to Rugby World Cup 2019, could you actually possibly predict or forecast who would win Rugby World Cup? So what I did, John, is I took the captains and the coaches, basically, if you will, the two lead individuals, the head coach and the captain of each of the top sides. I think I worked through about 10 sides.
Okay.
And by the time I'd completed all 20 of these blueprints, what was very clear is that two teams really stood out, the teams being South Africa and England. And of the two, South Africa stood out even more so because there was a high performance line of code in the South African coach's blueprint in that year. And it was actually not mirrored or matched in any other coach or captain of any other side. So this led me to make the prediction that South Africa would play England in the final and that South Africa would go on to win, which is exactly what happened.
Amazing.
Anyway, we come to the next Rugby World Cup, which was last year in 2023. And of course, you've got your skeptics and your people out there, who are following you, maybe sometimes trolling you. I was like, well, you got it right the first time. I bet you can't get it right the second time. It's amazing how people just love failure. So I said, well, look, I'll give it a go. I mean, I love what I do. And if I get something wrong, I don't see it as failure. I see it as a learning.
Yes.
I mean, if I don't make mistakes, how on earth can I learn? And also, I'm the only person that I'm aware of in the world that's doing this. So it's a pretty lonely place to be. So, hey, I'm up for criticism at any stage. And so, John, I set about doing this again, using exactly the same techniques. However, this time, because my research and my analytical skills and my understanding of blueprints has evolved so much, I actually developed the equivalent of a scorecard.
Okay.
And I applied these scorecards into the Rugby World Cup. Now, before Rugby World Cup 2023 began, there was so much hype in the media that it was basically going to be contested between France and Ireland.
Right.
France were peaking. It was being held in France. They had home country advantage. Ireland were the best rugby side in the world. They were literally unstoppable. And so this was all the rugby media and the rugby expert hype. Anyway, when I actually did my calculations, lo and behold, I came up with a result that said South Africa will win again. And look, John, that's not a very popular result. Also, people would then turn around and say, you're just saying this because you're South African. Come on. Let's just. So again, my findings were met with a huge amount of skepticism. And John, all of this was, put on social media, and I put out tweets about this, etc. Anyway, that's exactly what happened. South Africa went on to win.
Yeah.
So the thing is, now I've done it twice. So 2 Rugby World Cups in a row. And what people don't understand, John, is that I've also gone back in time and analyzed previous Rugby World Cups and analyzed what was going on in the lives of for example, like a Richie McCaw, the year that he won it, for New Zealand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a huge, there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours that have been plowed into this, coupled with the analysis and review of thousands of blueprints. So when I'm doing this and building this, I'm not just working off a small data set. I'm actually working off something that is huge, and much of it is locked up in here. So, John, really what the scorecard did is it then revealed to me, well, hold on a moment, I'm sitting with something very, very interesting. And there is, without doubt, a robustness to this scorecard, which means that I can load information and I can then start to make deductions. Now, the deductions that I'm making cannot, it's not like I can sit here and say, this is exactly what is going to happen. But what I can reveal with and through numbers and scores, and this is what is almost what you would call advantage this versus disadvantage that.
Yeah.
And so, John, this is what I've done around the American election. Obviously, now that we know, who the major players are, because it's Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, and it is Kamala Harris, and it is Tim Walz.
Yeah.
And so I have set about building their mathematical blueprints.
Mm-hmm.
Within those blueprints, I'm working with sometimes north of 50 data points. I then have taken all these various data points and I've scored them and I've put them back into a scorecard. And I know you're actually sitting with it, John.
Yes. Would you like me to switch to it?
Well, absolutely. And then I'll walk through some of the intelligence, just high level, because otherwise it gets too data heavy for people to understand. Sure. Right. So, John, there we've basically got it. Now, 2024, the most important number to focus on in the year 2024 is 24. So whenever you see a number 24 within someone's intelligent mathematical blueprint, it is a direct synchronicity in a positive way with this year, right?
Right.
The next one that you look for is the number 8, because if you take the year 2024, 2024, and you add those numbers together, you get 8.
Yeah.
So 2024 is giving us a clue, if you will, to look for the number 24, and it's also giving us a clue to look for the number 8.
Okay, yeah, got you.
So what I have done, and there you can actually see the scores. So underneath the number 24, Donald Trump scores is 0. Underneath the 80 scores are 4.
Mm-hmm.
Vance under 24 scores are 2, and under an 8 scores are 3. So their combined scores locked in around the clues 24 and 8 total 9. When you look at the Democrats and you've got Kamala Harris, she's got 3 8s, and Tim Walz, well, his chart is just packed.
Wow,
packed. He's got 2 24s, he's got 6 8s. Together they make 8, and basically Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's scores, when added together, give 11. So 11 to 9, it's still close. It's still tight. However, there is absolutely no doubt about that if we just focus on this, the advantage, or if you will, the razor's edge, which is often what defines the difference between winning and losing, definitely seems to be in favor of the Democrats. Now, John, we do another exercise where what I do is I combine the numbers of the various teams, if you will. So, team Republican, team Democrat, and I look to see whether I can see any significant results. And there is no significant result in a favorable way for Trump or Vance. However, when you take the birthday of Kamala Harris, the 20th, and you take the birthday of her running mate, Tim Walz, the 6th, if you add them together, you get 26.
Mm-hmm.
Now, John, 2 and 6 gives you 8. So that immediately, the 8 from 26 is immediately locking into this year, 2024. And the 26 there is providing a clue in terms of the year 2026. So if you look at it from a timeline perspective, on a birthday level, which is a critically important set of numbers in any intelligent mathematical blueprint, the combination of Harris and Walz has a golden combination for the period 2024 to 2026. And similarly, John, on a life path level. So if you take Kamala Harris's date of birth and you add it together, you get the score 1994, and for Tim Walz you get 1974. Okay. You add those two numbers together, you get 3968, and if you split that apart, 3 plus 9 plus 6 plus 8 gives you 26. And again, there's a reveal in terms of 2024 to 2026, and this is also on a critically important sequence, which is understanding the life path. So here we've got, again, John, two synchronicities that exist in the favor of Harris and Walz, which do not exist within the Republicans. So if you take this coupled with the 11-9, this first cut, if you will, of the data is most definitely, in my opinion, revealing quite a substantial advantage for the Democrats running up to the actual election. So if someone had to say to me, right, Chris, you have to put your money where your mouth is, what I would say is that the probability of the Democrats, of Harris and Walz, pipping Trump and Vance is pretty high.
Yeah, and again, this is the same template that you kind of used there for the Rugby World Cups as well.
Exactly, John. This is the type of analytics that I used around the World Cup in order to, because the thing is, the moment you open your mind in terms of the fact that every single year is a different number, is a different energy, and if you've got energies that correspond with that year within your blueprint, surely something's going to happen because there's a natural synchronicity. So therefore, if you will, the year is more in your favor than in the favor of someone who hasn't got those kind of synchronicities. So there is the first cut of the information, John. And remember, it's a first cut because this is a scorecard, and then I do deeper modeling. But John, I think there's another element to this. And that is, I look at this and I say, just stop and think about what happened when Trump lost to Biden.
Yeah.
It was a very, very, very ugly, acrimonious situation.
Yeah.
Now, here we are looking at a scorecard, which basically, if it is 100% correct, and we'll only find out in November when America goes to the polls, but if this result is accurate and the Democrats win, what does this mean for America? Are the likes of Trump actually going to take this lying down? Are his Make America Great Again supporters going to take this lying down?
Yeah, well, history kind of suggests that is unlikely.
What is actually going to potentially explode within America on the back of the Democrats winning and them having the first female president of the United States? What chaos could potentially be unleashed? And, John, this actually builds into the second slide that I created for tonight. And the reason I've done this is to actually reveal to you and the audience just how acrimonious things are going to become between Harris and Trump. So if we take Donald Trump's date of birth, and there it's shown at the top, 14th of June, 1946. And if you add those numbers together, you get 1966.
Okay.
You split the 1, the 9, the 6, and the 6 apart, you get 22. 2 and 2 becomes 4. So Donald Trump has got a 22/4 life path. When you repeat the same exercise for Kamala Harris, you find that she's got a 23/5 life path.
Okay.
So Trump is a 4 and Harris is a 5. Now, the thing is, 4 and 5 are polar opposites. as are 1 and 8, 2 and 7, and 3 and 6. But 4 and 5 are the worst polar opposites, because what you've got here is you've literally got the energy of the number 4, which is almost like a brick coming through a window. Okay. The number 4 is Earth. It is relentless. It is ruthless. It is practical. It is rigid. It is autocratic. It is dictatorial. Now, remember, what I'm describing there is the number 4 energy, if you will, from the dark or the shadow side, the negative side.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So this is what would be unleashed with and through Trump should he lose the election and not accept it.
Okay. Yes.
Now, the number 5 is the exact opposite of the number 4, where the number 4 is all about structure and plans and rigidity, and everything has to be done. The number 5 is expansive. The number 5 is all about freedom. The number 5 is the energy that cannot be contained. And if you tell the number 5 energy what to do, it will go and do exactly the opposite.
Yes.
So now look at this and look at the individuals involved here. Basically, the harder Trump pushes Harris, the more she's going to go into her 5, the more she's basically going to go for him, because it's like, don't you tell me what to do, and don't you try and intimidate me. So the more fire he throws her way, the more fire she's going to throw his way.
Yes.
And you know, John, this is just, I mean, isn't it amazing that if you take Trump, who's a 22, and Harris, who's a 23, you add them together, you get 45. And guess what? I mean, who was POTUS 45? Donald Trump.
Oh, crikey, yes.
So here we've got, I mean, this is literally like a watershed moment. If I've ever seen a volcano that is primed to explode, it is the volcano that exists between these two people. And the thing is, John, my concern is that the volcano that is basically building between these two individuals, and that may very well explode between these two individuals, could very well build and explode between their supporters.
Yes. Yes. I could certainly see that.
So are we actually, John, are we looking at a situation here where basically in the lead up to the election and on the outcome of the election, we are going to watch America eat itself alive from the inside?
Yeah, I mean, I find this fascinating. Last time the election took place, I was actually living in America still. The Donald Trump thing is he's a very divisive energy, and I have very good friends who I have a lot of respect for, who love him to bits, and I have very good friends who I respect a lot who are the total opposite of that. But there's nobody sat in the middle. There's nobody sat on the fence there between those two levels. So it creates the powder keg. I see it. You know, I came back soon after the slightly contested result, let's say, was kind of put into place. But yeah, I just see that this time around, this has got even more incendiary. This does look. I mean, I think the little fires you got alongside the 22 to 4 and the 23 to 5 are going to be, you know, quite prophetic.
Well, John, I have seen this over and over and over again in relationships where, for example, two people have asked me to model their respective intelligent mathematical blueprints. And, you know, wherever, and I also did this for a business back in South Africa. And where you see a 4 and a 5 combining like this, especially on a life path level, John, sure, these two energies just do not mix. They rub each other up the wrong way. They get under each other's skin, and they know exactly how to push each other's buttons in order to, if you will, elicit the very worst out of each other. Right. So for me, this is hugely, hugely, hugely concerning. And John, if we can just move on to the next slide, the final slide in this pack. So here what I've got, John, is I've got Donald Trump on the left, and I've got Kamala Harris on the right. And this is a data extract from the mathematical modeling that I do. And if we focus on 2024, what we can see is the number sequence 10, 1, 15, 6, 15, 6 for Donald Trump. For Kamala Harris, it's 11, 2, 11, 2, 5, 14. Now, because I understand numbers as well as what I do, I realize that whenever you're dealing with the number 2, you're working in octaves. So 2, 11, 20, are you with me? That 29, they all add up to somehow or reduce down to the number 2. So the fact that Kamala Harris has got 11, 2, theming her life journey in 2024, coupled with another 11, 2 to the left in the physical realm, means that this year is coded to be exceptionally intense experience for her on a personal level, because she's born on the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 and 0 gives you 2. So there's the correlation, right?
Yeah.
So that actually is a favorable outcome. Now, if you look at Donald Trump, that 15-6, that double 6 that we can see over there with the white exclamation marks, what that is revealing is it is revealing extraordinarily troubled relationships and a lot of challenges on a family level, because the number 6 is all about relationships, responsibility, family, community, matters of the heart. So looking at these lines of code and understanding them the way I do and the way I can read them, again, the line of code in 2024 is far more congruent for success in the life of Kamala Harris than it is in Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, John, we can take all of this and we can say, right, so there is some data, there's a scorecard, there's some mathematical modeling, there's all of this. You know, here is some intelligence, which basically, if I am to be totally honest with you, definitely looks in the advantage of the Democrats and not the Republicans. However, what does all of this mean? Because, you know, now you start opening your mind to, well, what if she wins?
Yes.
You know, what is this going to unleash inside of Trump? What is this going to unleash inside of his supporters? You know, John, and the other thing is, if America literally does begin to eat itself alive from the inside because of the division that has been created on the back of this election, what does that mean for the American economy? You know, John, all we've got to do is just take a step back and think about, you know, this world basically is driven and runs and feeds off the might of America.
Yes.
You know, if America begins to collapse, if the American economy begins to collapse, you know, if America catches a cold, the rest of the world get pneumonia. This is the kind of thing that is keeping me awake at night. Because the thing is, John, also, next year, 2025, if you add those numbers together, 2025, it gives you 9. Now, everything that we are experiencing happens in cycles of 9. So next year, number 9 is the end, John.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's the end of this cycle that began in 2017. And, you know, all we've got to do, John, let's just look back in history. The First World War ended in 1918.
Yeah.
Right? 1, 9, 1, 8, 19, 1 plus 9, 10, 1 plus 1 is a 0.
Yeah.
The Second World War ended in 1945, 1945, again 19.
Yes.
You know, 2026 is a number 1 year.
Yes.
What are we heading into? And John, when you spoke earlier about the fact that we are headed into deeply, deeply troubled times, I really hope that the people who are watching this actually take cognizance of this, because we are heading into times which have never been experienced before, not in terms of the intensity or the magnitude or anything. And, you know, John, we've got to start opening our minds up to what happens if the American economy collapses.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
What does that mean for the rest of the world? What does it mean for the man in the street, etc., etc., etc.? So much is building, and if you look at life already, I mean, John, life is tough. Look at the cost of living crisis that we've got in the UK.
Right. Right. And I know from my experience over in America with my daughter Stephanie, I know her and her friends. It is such a struggle. It is such a struggle to keep, heads above water financially. It's just so loaded against people now. It is past breaking point almost, or it's close to.
So, John, people watching this could turn around and say, well, they're the two of them. They're discussing some really fascinating and interesting things. But once again, it's all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And this is where I would genuinely like to bring in a completely different dimension. And I know this is something that you feel terribly strongly about as well. So feel free to take over from me, John.
Sure.
When the darkest of days descend upon us, and I really believe, John, that the darkest of days are descending upon us, there is only one thing that we will be able to control,
That's
and
true.
that is our thoughts.
Yeah.
When everything else has been taken away from you,
Yeah.
in terms of control,
Yeah.
the only thing that you can control is your mind.
This is true.
And John, when we, there's the Ukraine war that's going on. There's the chaos in the Middle East at the moment. War could explode in many, many, many different dimensions. Maybe on the back of this election, who knows? But you know what, John? I think that as we go forward, the greatest war that people are going to have to deal with is the war that is going on in the 6 inches between their ears. And to me, this is a war on consciousness.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Chris. I think this is always supposed to be this way. Everything's prophesized for this through, whichever text, religious and ancient texts you look at. This is the time, where the war for consciousness plays out. And we have a choice. There is nobody dictating the direction that we're going because we have free will. But there is an agenda out there to drag people down into fear. Whereas when I look at it, I'm excited that changes are going to happen. Now, I'm not excited about the thought that, a lot of people might end up leaving the planet because of whatever is about to unfold. But I believe that there is a plan out there that was always, this time was always destined to happen. And people have a choice. They can descend into fear. They can be captured by this. And one of the things I also am very aware of is that the mainstream media does not reflect what is really happening in the world. They reflect the aspects that the narratives that they want the people to hear that keep them small. There is an equal amount of light that goes on in the planet relative to the dark, and yet it never gets any focus because they are trying to get people to focus on the dark, to fall into fear. Because what happens when you're in fear? You give away your power. Okay, so that to me is the agenda that's at play. But here's the good news. The good news is that we're starting to see through this. There is a growing groundswell of people around the planet who are now realizing actually the power is not with these war brokers, and actually the power is with us. The power is with us. From a collective basis, when we come together and we start to focus on the high frequency energies that are at our disposal, we can move mountains. We can create a world of unspeakable beauty rather than the density that is being pushed our way. But to get there, we are going to have to go through some, as you say, Chris, some dark days, because that is the way that people will awaken. Chaos is a prerequisite for change. So the reason chaos is about to descend is because it will help to trigger people. And it's nobody's fault that they're asleep at the wheel, to be honest with you, because, this is our conditioning and programming that's gone on for so long. We've had it our entire lives. How would you see through it? Now, some of us had the privilege to kind of be able to take a step back and realize that there's something else going on, and then we can start to shine a light for other people and say, no, come on, over here. Actually, it's a lot better when you look at it this way. And it's, honestly, I believe that war for consciousness, as you put it, Chris, is absolutely playing out, and it will continue to intensify because the old guard who want to retain control, the old ego-driven, the male-dominated world of the past, and it is the past because we are now entering into a new era, which is going to be all about the number two kind of energy rather than the number one. Chris, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's so interesting, John, because we come out of the 1900s, and all you've got to do is just begin to apply your mind around the number 19. The number 19 is all about independence. The number 19 is all about the ego. The number 19 is all about the masculine energy, the alpha, if you will.
Yes.
It's rather interesting that my mathematical blueprint is filled with number 19s. And my journey has been a very extreme one to basically knock all of those elements out of me. And I kid not when I say knock them out of me. I think this is why I'm now able, on the back of multiple train smashes, I'm now able to look at the world through a completely different set of lenses and a far more ecological set of lenses.
Mm-hmm.
John, the moment we moved into the 2000s, which is the 20, the number one, the masculine energy started to fall away, and the number two energy started to come through. This is the feminine energy. Now, this is the energy of nurturing, cooperation, collaboration, peace, harmony, equilibrium. Now, but the thing is, John, it's not just all moonshine and roses in the beginning. Like everything, when there's a transition, it's almost like a merger or an acquisition of two businesses. The two teams come together, and then, if you will, eventually the old guard have got to be stripped away and either made redundant or whatever, or given a set of golden handcuffs. But off you go there. And that's it. And then a new guard takes over and moves the business into a new dimension. So the thing is, right now, what we're going through is most definitely the chaos between the number one energy still fighting for survival and the number two energy coming in and saying, hold on a moment, it's my turn to play now. And it is massively exacerbated right now in the 2020s.
Yes.
Because you've got the two twos and then the zero. So you're with me, and the zero amplifies it. So the moment from 2020 through to 2029, we are dealing with a period of massively amplified emotions. This is why the world is in such a state of chaos at the moment, John.
Yeah.
Right? But what is happening is just this emotional upheaval, this war that is going on between the number one and the number two. And this, John, remember what is happening now, what is beginning now in 2024 is going to intensify massively into 2025. Then it's going to still run 2026, 2027, 2028. That's going to start releasing 2029, and by the time we move into 2030, in comes the number three, and the number three is all about communication, creativity. It's the number three is a far more agreeable energy than, for example, the number two, especially when the number two is threatened, like it is at the moment by the number one. So this is what is going on, John. So anybody that thinks that it's going to get better, it really needs their head read, because it's going to get significantly worse very quickly during the second half of the 2020s, from 2026, 27, 28, and by 2029 it will basically start to settle down, and then 2030 you'll see a really big shift, which makes sense because 2030 is a number 5 universal year. So of course it's going to bring a tremendous amount of change. Yeah. and change for the better. But John, you were talking earlier about embracing fear and embracing negativity and having this constant fear and negativity fed into your world through the media, through newspapers, through radio, through television, etc., and really struggling to, if you will, find some light. Dr. Joe Dispenza discusses it beautifully, and I'm a great fan of Dr. Joe
Yes,
Dispenza.
me too.
And Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about matter and particle or wave.
Yes.
Now, wave is light. Now, you cannot be in the light when your world is full of fear, full of anxiety, full of negativity. The more you suck in the negativity, the more you suck in the fear, the more you suck in, if you will, the woes of the world, the denser you become. The
Yes.
denser you become, the more you move into matter. The more you move into matter, the weaker you become in terms of your light field, your particle field. And John, this is why I say the war, the greatest war, the most scary, the most terrifying war that we are looking at in the next couple of years is not a war between nations. It's actually the war between the war in people's minds.
Yes.
Because if people are not able to begin to embrace positivity and goodness and the higher vibrations, love and forgiveness and all of it, if they're not able to embrace that here in their thoughts, it cannot become part of them. And you know, John, it brings us back to the old saying, as within, so without.
Yes.
You know, if inside you're filled with hatred and negativity and fear and all of this, the only thing that can manifest on the outside of you in your world through relationships, through results, through everything is exactly the same.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is why I say, and I'm so grateful for the platform that you gift me every now and then, John, to be able to chat about this, because this is the greatest war. And people that are not able to make this transition in their minds, when everything around them is chaos, yet they are still able to control their minds, they are the people that are going to bring about the greatest mental health pandemic that this world has ever seen, John.
Yeah. I totally understand where you're coming from, and yeah, as a fan of Dr. Joe, as well, and the universal law, the law of correspondence, has above, so below. Okay, so that's talking to exactly what you're talking about there. Again, I don't judge against anybody who gets stuck in fear, because this is what we've been fed. It's our diet that we've been on for as long as we've been around. We've been fed this diet of fear because it's all about control. Once you actually see through it, you have a choice. You have a choice to elevate those emotions, and you can still live a life in joy. You can still live a life with love and happiness and unconditional. It's a choice, you know? And I think this is a time when we come together in community. But you're right, mental sovereignty is very important. The ability to be able to, move, not get drawn into the drama, because that is part of the plan, right? Get drawn into the drama.
And you know, John, this is why, and I come back to the conversation we had earlier about, IQ, EQ, and SQ, if you will, the spiritual quotient. Probably the most important thing that anybody can do going forward is to be an agent through which people are uplifted spiritually.
Yes.
John, when people are broken, when everything that you have thought to be true or deemed to be true or deemed to be important, when everything is taken away from you in a flash, the shock, the horror, the devastation. I know, John, because I failed spectacularly on a business venture.
Mm-hmm.
The shock, the horror, the humiliation, the disbelief, the chaos. And that's just failing on a business venture.
Yeah, right.
So can you imagine when everything that you kind of think or imagine or have held and revered as being true, all of a sudden just collapses around your ears? This is why I spoke about a mental health pandemic across the entire world. And this is why it is going to be so important for those people who have the ability to mind their minds.
Yes.
They are going to be the light workers that will step up en masse to be able to help the people who are in, if you will, the real dark places, out from the darkness into the light. And John, there's only one way. You know, if you look at your outside world, and if your outside world is an absolute disaster, it is an indication or a mirror of what you are on the inside. And you know what, John? You can't change a person. Change comes from within. You have to get to the point. The only time people change, John, and I've noticed this over and over again, is when the pain is greater than the gain.
Yes.
And you know, and that's it. When the pain of where I am, the current experience that I'm in, is so extreme that it is easier for me to move and change and embrace change the game. That's when this happens. And I think that's what we are going to see on a global level. Is we're going to see so much pain that people are going to be forced to change.
Yeah.
Because the gain of the change will be greater, than the pain. The pain will actually be at a level that is intolerable. So yes, John, we're painting very dark pictures, but the thing is, remember, it always gets darkest just before dawn.
Yes. Yes, I know that's why I'm excited about the future, because I know we're heading towards dark times, but I know that where this takes us beyond that is so worthwhile, the journey, right? And it's incredible to think we came here for this, right? This is what we signed up for. But, you know, I'm 100% with you. I think that mental sovereignty thing is so important going forward. And I think a lot of people will awaken, and a lot of people already have. They're already on that journey. And I think that there is a momentum that is building up, that this chaos that we are about to see will help people to come round to the power that they have, to be able to step into that power, and we work together as a collective consciousness, and we create our world of unspeakable beauty rather than this world that is descending into chaos. So, you know, there is definitely a light at the end of the tunnel. It's something to genuinely get excited about. And as far as the US election is concerned, it will be fascinating to see how that plays off, because, you know, I've seen it also from an astrological perspective, people talking about the states starting to fall apart, breaking away, you know, and the United States no longer being united. But yeah, who knows, right? That's something we have to see.
So, John, in when I do the mathematical modeling, I actually build multiple views.
Yeah.
Because obviously the more data you've got, the more complete the picture. What I showed tonight were just extracts. What I want people to know and remember is that in 2025, one of the views that I have built for Donald Trump represents a brand new beginning of the most extreme kind, right? So what is this new beginning? Because it is definitely linked with leadership, John. It is definitely linked with leadership. So what beyond this election lies in store for Donald Trump in concentrated format on a leadership level? And I think the question that needs to be asked is, what will he be leading and who will he be leading?
Yes. This is the gift that keeps giving, isn't it? It's you just don't know what's going to come next, but you know, it is exciting going into this. Is it troubling? Kind of, but at the same time, as I say, it all depends on your perspective. And to my mind, you know, where we're heading ultimately here is going to be incredible. But do we need to be wary of what is going to happen in the near term? Yeah, it's forewarned is forearmed.
John, I love the words of the great Napoleon Hill, who wrote the book Think and Grow Rich. He said, every adversity brings the equivalent seed of opportunity. You see again, look at how the mindset, mind your mind. So even although everything around you is collapsing, adversity, it is bringing with it the equivalent seed of opportunity. Now, you know who's going to be able to capitalize on that seed? The people whose minds are together.
Yes.
If you have embraced all this negativity, all this hatred, all this fear, all this doom, all this gloom, you will not be able to see the opportunity that is staring you in the face.
Yes.
And this is why the work that I am doing, the work that you are doing, the work that many, many other people around the planet are doing right now, in order to elevate the consciousness of people before these events is critical. And once again, John, my true respect, love, and gratitude to you and Jolie for what you are doing to be able to help people out there at least encounter this material. The first time they watch it, they may think, oh, what a load of baloney. Let's see at the end of the year whether they are coming back to watch this again and again and again, thinking, oh my word, this is happening around me. The most important thing that I can take out of all of this is I need to mind my mind.
Yes. 100%, Chris. I mean, I love the fact that, we are standing up to be counted now, because if in 6 months' time we're filled with a world of rainbows and unicorns, then we might as well just step down, right? we might as well. We're going to go home, right, and take our toys with us. But that, I honestly don't think that is going to be the case. Much though it would be nice in some ways. But yeah, I agree with you, and I really truly appreciate your friendship, Chris. I appreciate what you and Suzanne in Human Futurology are doing for people out there, and I think that you have a big role to play in however this unfurls in the future, because once people start to really step into the power of this, and with universities around you backing you up to take this research further so we can dig deeper and understand the nature of consciousness and the human experience even deeper. How fantastic will that be?
Always an absolute pleasure to chat to you. I love Elevated Planet. I love you. I love Jolie, and I love what you represent and what you stand for. As I wrap up now, once again, I just come back to the data. I come back to the scorecards. I come back to the intelligence. On the day, John, I could be wrong, right? But if I look at all the evidence before me, it is most definitely advantage Harris and Walz.
Yeah.
And on the back of that, any thinking person now needs to begin to open their mind as to, well, what could flow from this?
I get it, Chris. I really do.
Scenario planning.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, as always, for sharing your wisdom, sharing the information, sharing your blueprints. And, let's see how this unfolds, because either way, we're coming back together to maybe to apologize when we got rainbow and unicorn land around us, or alternatively, we're just going to help other people to kind of weather the storms that could come down upon them. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. As I say, to you and Suzanne, a brilliant team working together to create, humanfuturology.co.uk. I recommend anybody checks it out and explore it for yourself, because that's what I did a few years ago, and I have never regretted it at all ever since. Fascinating. And thank you to our Elevated Planet community for being here today. And also, just so you know, if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, send me an email to johndrew@elevatedplanet.life. So for now, we will say farewell. We will doubtless be back again sometime in the not too distant future. Take care.